The forest was quiet after the confrontation, the scent of smoke and the fading heat of blaster fire hanging in the air. Luke stood beside Vader, the villagers still watching from a cautious distance. They did not cheer. They did not thank him. They simply watched with wary, quiet hope, the kind of hope that hurts to hold. Luke felt the tension in his father's presence, the way the force around him stormed in confusion. Vader had defied the Emperor for the boy, not for the galaxy, not for redemption, for the one person who had looked at him and not seen a monster. They left the moon before more Imperial ships could arrive, boarding Vader's personal shuttle in silence. Luke sat across from him, hands folded, heart pounding. Vader said nothing, but his silence was no longer distant. It felt fragile. Luke sensed that Vader was not afraid of Luke. He was afraid of himself, of what would happen now, of what the Emperor would do, of what he might be forced to become again. Luke reached out and placed his hand gently on his father's glove, not gripping, just resting. A gesture of grounding, a gesture of presence. The moment was delicate, like holding something cracked and precious. In hyperspace, Luke finally spoke. We can't go back to him. His voice was steady, but his heart was racing. Vader did not answer right away. His mask faced forward, but Luke felt the storm inside him. Loyalty forged in fear, obedience conditioned through agony, love twisted into servitude. Vader had belonged to the Emperor for so long that freedom felt like a wound. Finally, Vader answered with a voice that sounded hollow at first, but clearer than before. No, we cannot. It was not triumph. It was acceptance. A door closing forever. Luke asked, "Then what do we do?" Vader turned his head, the soft hiss of the respirator the only sound. "We survive, and in time, we choose a side." The galaxy did not freeze when they left the Emperor. The Empire continued its operations. Fleets moved. Orders were given. The machine kept working. But something foundational had cracked. The Emperor felt it. The Force felt it. The whisper spread quietly at first. Lord Vader has gone silent. Lord Vader is missing. Then louder. The Emperor is searching for someone. Entire squads were dispatched to find Luke. Entire fleets repositioned. The Empire did not panic. The Empire did not hesitate. But it tightened like a fist around the galaxy's throat. Luke and Vader could not remain in the open. They fled into the Outer Rim, landing on worlds untouched by Imperial patrols, some barely touched by civilization at all. They traveled in disguise when they could. Vader cloaked and hunched, Luke speaking for them both. Luke learned quickly how to read fear in a crowd, how to avoid attention, how to appear small even when the Force inside him burned brighter every day. They stayed in abandoned outposts, crashed temples, forgotten trading posts reclaimed by vines. Luke trained with his father among ruins, where the wind carried the voices of the past. Vader taught him control, how to move with intention, how to defend, how to see the invisible currents of the Force. But Luke practiced a different discipline when his father wasn't looking. He tried to heal. He would sit for hours with small, wounded creatures, or broken circuits, or cracked stone carvings, trying to understand how to encourage the Force to restore rather than reshape. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But the Force always felt gentler in Luke's hands, as though it were relieved. Vader watched him from a distance, not with jealousy, though there were moments of pain, but with something like awe. Vader had known power, destruction, mastery. But Luke knew compassion like it was breath. And the galaxy had never feared compassion. It feared what compassion could inspire. As months passed, they began to encounter scattered rebel cells. Most fired at Vader on sight. Luke would rush between them, shouting, not with command but desperation. Some listened, some didn't. One cell nearly killed Vader. Another cell nearly killed Luke. But then came the first moment of trust, small but real. A group of rebels on a dying mining moon. Their base collapsing, air systems failing. Vader could have left, but Luke stayed. And his father stayed because Luke stayed. Vader repaired the oxygen intake systems. Luke tended to the wounded. And when the rebels realized they were breathing because of the Sith they had been taught to fear, the galaxy shifted again, quietly, like the turning of a massive gear. Word spread, not through official channels, through whispers, through smuggler routes, through old clone networks. The rumor became a question, and the question became a possibility. What if Lord Vader is not loyal to the Emperor anymore? Meanwhile, the Emperor searched. His rage was cold, controlled, perfectly calculated. He knew Vader better than anyone. He knew the one weakness that even Vader could not sever: love. So he set a trap, not for Vader, but for Luke. He allowed Luke's existence to leak. He allowed knowledge of Padme to surface. He allowed a false archive to be discovered, suggesting that the Jedi had conspired to kill Vader's family and that the Empire had saved Luke as an infant. It was bait, perfect bait, and Vader saw it. Vader recognized the Emperor's hand, but Luke did not. Luke wanted answers. Luke needed truth. Vader could not forbid him. So they traveled to Naboo, a world still grieving ghosts it could not name, still speaking Padme's name in poems and in songs, still tending the quiet monument built after her death. Luke walked the shores where she once stood. He walked the palace halls where she once spoke. He felt echoes of her presence in the Force, warm and sad and strong. And for the first time, Luke asked no questions. The truth spoke for itself. They visited the lake house at dawn. Vader did not step inside. He remained at the doorway, as if crossing the threshold would be too much to bear. Luke touched the doorway and felt something he couldn't describe, a memory he never lived, a kindness he never received, a love he never knew. And Luke understood what had broken his father. Not the war, not the Empire, not the Jedi. Loss. Luke turned to Vader, voice small but steady. "You loved her." Vader's voice came like a rasp of air struggling through the respirator. More than anything, Luke stepped closer. "Then love didn't break you. Fear did." Those words cut deeper than any lightsaber. Vader did not react in anger. He collapsed, not to his knees, not in dramatic gesture, but inward, shoulders folding, presence shrinking. The mask did not hide the sound of his breath catching. Luke knelt beside him, one hand on the cold metal that housed the remnants of the man within. Luke said nothing. He just stayed, and that was the moment when the Force shifted in a way that every living thing felt. Because the galaxy had not seen Darth Vader fall to his knees since the day Anakin Skywalker died. But the Emperor felt it. He struck swiftly. Star Destroyers descended. TIEs screamed through the sky. Imperial troops surrounded the lake, the palace, the hills. Vader and Luke fled into the plains, racing toward an ancient Gungan tunnel network Vader barely remembered from another life. Blaster bolts carved molten streaks through trees. Vader deflected them even while running. Luke guided them with the Force, sensing the maze beneath their feet. The Emperor was not trying to kill them. He was trying to separate them, and he succeeded. Explosives detonated. The ground beneath Luke collapsed. Vader lunged, but the earth swallowed the boy into darkness. Vader roared, not with rage alone, but with terror, the kind of terror that had shaped his fall. And the Emperor smiled across the stars. Luke awoke in dim blue shadows, water dripping, old stone tunnels carved by a forgotten civilization. He was alive, bruised, breath shallow, but alive. He called out through the Force, not loud, but clear. "Father." And Vader felt him. A storm rose through Vader, power building like a star going supernova. Stormtroopers stopped firing. Officers froze. The air vibrated as if the planet itself were holding its breath. Vader ignited his lightsaber, not with fury, but with purpose so absolute the Force trembled. He tore through battalions. He broke walkers. He crushed starships mid-flight, but he did not kill those who surrendered. Luke felt his father fighting with restraint, not the wild violence of the Sith, not the rigid justice of the Jedi, but something new, something between. When Vader finally reached the tunnels, Luke was waiting, covered in dust, tired, but alive. Vader stopped just feet away. He did not embrace his son, but he no longer held himself apart from him either. Luke stood. He reached out. Vader reached back. And in that moment, the galaxy changed. They fled Naboo together, hunted now not as fugitives, but as variables in a future Palpatine could no longer predict. The rebellion heard the whispers. The Empire tightened its grip. The Force swirled like a storm preparing to break. Because now, the question was no longer whether Luke would bring Vader to the light, or whether Vader would pull Luke into the dark. The question became, can father and son forge something new? Something the galaxy has never seen? A path beyond Sith, beyond Jedi. A path built not on fear, not on doctrine, but on love. And the galaxy was watching, because whatever choice they made next would decide the fate of every living soul under the stars. The outer reaches of the galaxy had a way of swallowing sound, of making even the loudest footsteps seem small. The world they hit on now was dry and red, a world where dust storms rolled like ocean tides and the wind sang low through the canyons. It was a place where few would follow, a place forgotten not because it lacked value, but because it lacked anything at all. Luke and Vader chose it because no one would think to look there. Not the Emperor, not the rebellion, not even the Force sensitives who still wandered in quiet shadows. They lived in the remains of an old communications outpost, long since stripped of its metal and systems. Luke spent his days repairing what little remained, learning to build tools from scraps, using the Force to sense weaknesses in metal and weld them without flame. Vader watched him sometimes, not to supervise, but to understand him. Luke was not learning because he needed to. He was learning because he wanted to bring life back to anything that had once served a purpose. And Vader, who had spent so many years destroying, found himself unable to look away from someone who could not help but restore. But their isolation could not last forever. One evening, as the sun bled violet across the horizon, a transmission found them. Faint, stuttering, incomplete. Luke found at first a distress beacon, but old, coded in a frequency used during the Clone Wars. Vader recognized it instantly. It was a clone signal, not a call for help, a call for meeting. That frequency had once been a brotherhood call, a signal that a soldier had lived past his intended purpose and wished to speak to someone who remembered what the world had once been. Luke looked at his father carefully. Vader stood still. There were very few things he feared, but memory was one of them. Luke didn't push. He simply asked, "Should we answer?" Vader took a long time before responding. "We go." They traveled to a derelict, refueling station orbiting a star on the edge of collapse. It was nearly dark inside, emergency lights flickering. Luke kept close, sensing emptiness, but not danger. And then they saw him. An old clone, armor rusted and scorched, helmet off, hair gone gray, a long scar across his jaw. He sat on a metal crate like he had been waiting for decades. When he looked up and saw Vader, he did not reach for a weapon. He simply nodded. The clone addressed Vader by name no one had spoken in years. General. Vader did not correct him. The clone introduced himself as one of the troopers who had once followed Anakin Skywalker across storms and sieges. One of the soldiers who had looked at him not as a Jedi or a hero, but as someone who bled beside them. He had removed his chip years ago when he realized what had been done to them. He spoke about the others, scattered, broken, wandering, some angry, some grieving, some lost. He said they were watching the galaxy now, seeing it churn in fear and tyranny. And then he looked at Luke. "You have his eyes," the clone whispered. Luke sat with him, listened, asked questions, not about war, about people, about how they laughed, how they celebrated victories, how they mourned. Vader stood apart, silent. The clone did not ask forgiveness. He did not offer it. He simply shared memory, and memory was heavy enough. When the conversation ended, the clone handed Luke something small, a copy of an old Republic comm frequency, one almost no one alive remembered. "If you need us," the clone said. "If the galaxy reaches the moment where choosing matters more than surviving, call." Luke nodded. Vader bowed his head, the smallest gesture of respect. They left the station, but something had changed. Luke had seen what his father had once led. Vader had remembered what he once fought for, and the galaxy felt both echoes at once. Meanwhile, the Emperor moved his pieces. He did not shout. He did not rage. He simply placed his hand over star systems like a shadow, letting governors and moffs feel the pressure of his displeasure. Any officer who questioned Vader's disappearance vanished. Fleets were deployed to worlds that had shown rebellious sentiments. Entire planets were stripped of their resources under the pretense of protection. The rebellion grew more desperate, and in their desperation, they debated. Could Vader be their ally? Or was this just another trap? Mon Mothma believed Luke's presence meant possibility. Other leaders believed Vader was too dangerous, too unpredictable. They did not know that the Emperor's real fear was not Vader conquering the rebellion. It was Vader joining them. Luke and Vader needed allies, but allies needed proof. So they made their first move, not a strike, not a battle. A rescue. They intercepted an Imperial transfer that was moving political prisoners to a labor moon where few ever returned from. Vader flew the shuttle himself, Luke beside him. When they landed, stormtroopers did not see Vader. They saw only a cloaked figure, lightsaber hidden, presence masked in a haze of confusion in the Force. Luke led the charge, disarming, disabling, freeing prisoners. Vader held the perimeter, intercepting reinforcements, cutting off communications, but refusing to kill unless he had no choice. The freed prisoners looked upon their rescuers and saw hope, confusing, terrifying, but real. And in that moment, the first whisper became a declaration. Darth Vader is no longer the Emperor's blade. He has chosen his son, and the galaxy trembled. News spread, faster than hyperspace, faster than fear. Some Imperial officers defected. Some rebel cells reached out. Old Jedi hiding in deep shadow felt something they had not felt in years, movement. The Force was leaning, not toward the light, not toward the dark, toward the balance that had been lost the day Anakin Skywalker fell. The Emperor felt it tightening. He understood what was coming. Not a war of armies, a war of belief. And belief is the one thing that can crack an empire from the inside. So he prepared the only response that could stop both father and son. He would not destroy Luke. He would make Luke need him, and he would make Vader watch. Luke and Vader knew he was coming. They could feel the storm building across space, gathering momentum, turning inevitability into destiny. They began to prepare, not with weapons alone, but with trust. Trust that was still fragile, still unspoken, still growing. One night, beneath a quiet sky full of unfamiliar stars, Luke finally asked the question that had been waiting in both of them since the day they met. Father, if the moment comes, and it is one or the other, do I bring you to the light? Or do you bring me into the dark? Vader looked at him, and for once, there was no conflict in the Force around him. There is no light without shadow, he said, and no shadow without light. The Force was never meant to be split, only guided. Luke absorbed this slowly, deeply. Then Vader said something he had not said to anyone, not since he was a boy. I do not want you to become me. Luke stepped closer, and I don't want to lose you. The wind moved between them like breath. They realized then that neither the Jedi nor the Sith had ever understood what balance meant. It was not purity. It was not power. It was not peace. It was love. And love, when chosen freely, is the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The Emperor was coming. The galaxy was ready. The Father and the Son would stand together. And the Force itself would decide what the galaxy would become.